Hi, this is Emily of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Kim Meyer, the host of Choose to Rise here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Choose to Rise, where we talk about living with positive mindsets, how to increase our confidence, building our faith, and living out our life on purpose. A new show comes out via podcast every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And if you want to catch the episode live instead, stop by Public House Media around 6:45 Central Standard Time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday as well. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Choose to Rise. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. My name is Brice Burge.
And I'm Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. Brice, we're going to talk about two epic clashes in the Champions League and talk about the Champions League semifinals. Then we're going to go domestic. MLS is a couple of months into the season now, and they're talking about expansion.
Yeah, that's all big news. I think the best place to go is to start with the Champions League first, just because the drama that's happened on the pitch is so much more compelling than the drama that necessarily happens off of it. So let's start with that. Ajax, Barcelona, Man City, and Liverpool got the wins in the second leg. However, it is Ajax, Barcelona, Liverpool, and Tottenham that actually advance out of the stage. Tottenham versus Ajax will be on Tuesday next week, April 30th, while Barcelona and Liverpool will face off on Wednesday, May 1st. Those two teams will flip the next week, with Liverpool and Barcelona playing on the 7th of May and Ajax and Tottenham playing on the 8th, setting up a great semifinal matchup. Let's talk about the upsets that kind of went into this, just because Ajax is not the team that we expected to be here, yet here they are.
Yeah, I mean, they draw the first game 1-1 at home. They go to Italy for the second leg, and Cristiano Ronaldo scores in the 28th minute, and then people feel like, okay, this is Juventus's tournament, this is Juventus' team, and then what Ajax has been doing all year, all tournament long, they continue to do it where they created better chances. They fought back. They got a goal in the 34th, and then in the 67th took the lead. They had another goal disallowed off an offsides around the 70-something minute, and they pulled off their second big upset in this tournament as they continue along and continue to shock the world, I think. And they've played Bayern Munich well in the group stage. They knocked off the champions Real Madrid, and now they knocked off Cristiano Ronaldo and Juventus. And it's an incredible story, because the way these kids play, they play full throttle. They never stop. They're almost too young to realize that they should stop. They don't know they've never been this stage before, and it's fun and refreshing. I think that's kind of what's kind of captured all of us, because for all the greatness that is Champions League, it is at times can be very kind of going by the books. The same teams are kind of always in there, semifinalists, finalists, champions. And to see this is just kind of it's just great to see. And it's a breath of fresh air.
When you have this Ajax team that's doing what they're able to do, their two goals actually came afterwards. So they had to not only equalize but score again to win along those goals, courtesy of Van de Beek and De Ligt in the 34th and 67th minute. This was a response that I think was nice, because not only is it a breath of fresh air, but it was a technical battle the entire way through. Possession was pretty even. Shots favored Ajax by 1. Shots on target favored by 1, and that was the big difference maker in this matchup. But when you have these teams, like we don't expect these teams to be evenly matched, but this was a game that we should start expecting out of the Champions League, because we've had some blowouts. Even that Liverpool game on the other side was just an absolute dredge to watch. It was extremely boring, with Liverpool blowing out Porto 4-1. So there's plenty of blowouts, or even Barcelona, who won 3-0 against Man U in the second leg. And then you have this really close, exciting game, and it added a lot of drama to it besides just the names on the jerseys. And that was something that I appreciated as a fan that believes in true sports anarchy, that the name on the front of the jersey does not mean everything. I mean, it adds a lot to a game, but it doesn't mean everything in terms of the game. You kind of get that pretentiousness that pops up with soccer sometimes, especially when you get to these leagues. And I think that's kind of like what you were saying, but to have that little bit of a different spin on it is just so fun and so freeing as a fan. Is a great opportunity, and I'm rooting for Ajax at this point, just because I think that they bring a lot to have that story to them. It's kind of like when Leicester City was kind of going through the EPL and won the EPL a couple years ago. You just kind of want something different, and it's good to see Ajax there.
Yeah, I agree, and for those who haven't followed soccer for a while, don't make no mistake, Ajax is a very historic club, one of the two powerhouses in Holland. They have won Champions Leagues before. Back in the 90s and 80s, they have produced a ton of world talent players. What has happened, though, over the last 2 decades or so is, as the money has grown and these teams have gone ultra rich, Ajax has kind of stayed the course and become a filter for these European clubs and have produced this talent, and they just don't have the money. But historically, they're one of Europe's most historic teams. It's just now the last 10, 15 years, the way the money has kind of talked a lot in soccer, they've kind of been pushed back a little bit. So it is nice to see them kind of come back in this roaring fashion and in this attack-minded, all-out, beautiful, constant attacking soccer, and to do it with such bravado is fantastic to see. And yeah, I think unless you are cheering for one of these 3 teams in Barcelona, in Liverpool, or in Tottenham, you're cheering for Ajax because it's just great story. It's awesome to see, and in the manner in which they're doing it and the style in which they're doing it, it's fantastic.
Let's talk about their opponent in this next round. It's going to be Tottenham. Again, made mention a little bit that said that Tottenham was they lost the second leg, but man, was this just absolutely crazy of a matchup. And so you got your 2 boring ones on the other side between Liverpool and Barcelona, but on this side it took a 4-3 game with a little bit of controversy, a lot of scoring early, including 5 goals in the first 21 minutes of the game. Only 2 goals came in the second half of this 7-goal affair, and ultimately it was Tottenham winning on away goals in the tiebreaker that gave them the ultimate aggregate win. What a crazy matchup this was from beginning to end.
Oh yeah, I mean, not the best played game in the world, because I thought some of the guys on the field had some real clinkers of matches, especially Laporte. But what an entertaining! I mean, right off the bat, 4 goals in the first 11 minutes, and it's kind of it's kind of like when you watch a boxing match and these guys have a strategy how they kind of want the match to go over the course of the 12 rounds, and then all of a sudden, both of them kind of hit haymakers early on, and strategy kind of went out the window, and they just went at each other and they just started playing, and that's kind of how this match was, where because of the early goal from Sterling, and then Son answered right back, and then Son answered again, and Silva got it back, and it's 2-2 after 11 minutes. All of a sudden, you kind of felt that tactically there wasn't a lot there, but these guys just went at each other and played, said, you know what, F this, we're going, and that's kind of what happened. for the large majority of the game. And I mean, you kind of feel for City in a way, because in the last play of the game, almost last play of the game, it looked like they won the game when Agüero got off of a bad pass from Eriksen and took a deflection, and he was on goal and set up Sterling for the winner, which would have been his hat trick. And then they go to VAR, and it looked like when the ball deflected off the City player, that deflected, not passed, deflected off Agüero, or to Agüero, that he was a half a human offsides, and they pulled it back. And it's interesting because we talk about VAR. VAR is a big issue around these things, but you see the ecstasy of the win when they score the game winner, thinking that they're going through, and then you see, it's incredible to see in real time how the emotion just gets plugged right off of them when the VAR replay says that he's offside and it's a no goal, and you just see the inflation of the whole stadium, of the fans, of the players. Incredible to watch. Absolutely, that was an incredible game to watch from start to finish.
The thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. I mean, it's a cliche when you think about it in sports, but there's been very few opportunities so far this calendar year that I think really embody that as what happened in Man City with this matchup. Just because, with Man City and their EPL schedule so far, and we've talked about the EPL a little bit with Tottenham being part of that group of four, along with Man City and Arsenal and other people that are just kind of trying to figure out who can not lose third place instead of going out and winning third place, and have Man City be so dominant in that facet, and then come up and lose such a close game like this one. Even though that they won, they still lost in the end. It is just it adds drama that you don't typically think you would find right away in soccer most of the time, but it was a ton of fun. And not being a fan of either team per se allowed the sport of soccer to really kind of be celebrated, and just some of the amazing plays. I mean, I thought that Sterling did an amazing job from beginning to end in this matchup, and what he was able to add in just pushing Man City, because even though they had those two goals in the first 21 minutes, he still kept pushing, and he still kept getting people open and helping out in the Agüero goal. What he was able to do was really just impressive in this matchup.
Yeah, Sterling was phenomenal. Son for Spurs was absolutely phenomenal. I got to give credit to Dele Alli, because when Sissoko went out early in the second half, around the 38th minute, instead of playing with two defensive midfielders, Spurs had to readjust on the fly, and Dele Alli, who's a much more attacking-minded player, had to drop back and kind of help Wanyama on the defensive end, and something he's not used to. And I thought, without having a huge game statistically or attacking-wise, did his part and did just enough to try to contain all of City's attacks. And so, he was great. It was just one of those games where, again, I don't cheer for any of these teams like you didn't, so you're really able to enjoy the whole spectacle that was the whole game, too. I agree with you on that. I thought it was fantastic as a neutral to watch it, and it sets up at semifinals where either Spurs, who has spent zero money on transfers this whole soccer season, and Ajax, who is a feeder team in a more basic sense in European soccer with great history, one of these two teams are going to be in the Champions League finals. That is incredible to think about.
Again, those matchups will be happening next week. Tottenham and Ajax will be Tuesday, April 30th, as well as the second leg on May 8th, while Barcelona and Liverpool will face off Wednesday on May 1st, and on Tuesday, May 7th. All four of those games will be at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to head back across the pond down to our homelands here in the United States. The MLS season is underway. We haven't talked about it for a while, and there's also some expansion news, so we'll talk about that here after the break. You're listening to Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.
The This is John Lauder, host of The Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, The Cheap Seats, where we talk about sports from the fans' perspective. A new show comes out every Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of The Cheap Seats. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. I'm Brice Burge. He is Ivan Sanchez. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at @BriceBurge. Brice is spelled with an I. And Ivan's handle is Ivan Sanchez C90. You can find all information on cool stuff over there. Let's talk about the MLS. MLS has lots of news. We haven't talked too much about it so far, but no surprise here that DC United as well as LAFC are your top two teams in the respective conferences. But after that, what happens is very interesting because there's a lot of things that we didn't really expect happening that happened, and we kind of look foolish. So,
what's new?
Yeah, we did exceptionally bad this time around. Namely, Toronto FC is number 2 in the Eastern Conference with a 4-1-1 record. They have a +7 goal differential with 13 points. At the bottom of the table, however, are your two big championship caliber teams in the New York Red Bulls and Atlanta United. They have 2 wins between the two of them. They sit at the bottom of the table with a -1 and -3 goal differential, which is actually a lesser goal differential than some of the teams in front of them, like FC Cincinnati, New York City FC, or New England is. But right now it's crazy just because when you look at the playoffs, Chicago's in the playoff hunt right now at a 2-3-2 record, and Toronto's way up there. Including being in front of Montreal, where we said that Montreal was probably going to be the best Canadian team this season. And Toronto is putting us to shame in that front. So, sticking with the Eastern Conference, what have been some of the storylines that have stuck out to you so far this season?
I mean, I think namely number one, you mentioned it, Atlanta United, just only one win so far in their first 6. They've suffered a lot with the change in personnel, change in coach. Fans still out there making a great environment, but it's just a different style of play that isn't working and isn't transferring on the field. And I think that's been the biggest surprise. I think New York Red Bulls too, just because they've kind of been the model of consistency in the MLS when it comes to year in, year out for the last 4 or 5 years. And they have been, the way their struggles too, like you said, a surprise. Toronto FC, in our defense, Montreal is only 2 points behind them. So we don't look that bad yet, but Toronto FC, considering the way their preseason went and how they got destroyed in the CONCACAF Champions League and how bad last season went, is also a surprise. And shout out to Caleb Porter, who has taken this new and improved Columbus Crew and kind of a local guys, kind of giving it some new life, some new energy. And entering last weekend, they were in second place in the East. So to see them doing well, Orlando FC, who's kind of struggled for the most part the last couple of years, they're sitting in a playoff spot in 5th. So, essentially everything we thought of has been reversed. So besides New England continues to be the consistency of terrible. So thank God for them.
Yeah, and we did think that FC Cincinnati would struggle in certain ways with them moving up into this top division, being promoted essentially compared to being a true expansion franchise like Atlanta or LAFC has been. But when you look at this Eastern Conference, Philadelphia and Columbus have been steady. Chicago, I think, is a big surprise in a positive sense. But the thing is that Chicago has just been able to make draws happen when they should have lost. And that is always an interesting team for me because I always try to find the team, how do you steal mediocrity from the jaws of defeat? And that is always going to be your benchmark team in terms of how good a league is. And right now it looks like, whether it's East or West, Chicago is that team right now that has gotten 3 draws when they should have had 3 losses. They should be 2-5 right now, and they're 2-3-2. And so for Chicago to come out here and do that, I think is interesting, because I don't think Chicago, even though Chicago's a stronger team than what they've had maybe the last 3 seasons, it's still not a very good squad.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. Yeah, I never trust a team that draws too many games, because sometimes you're going to draw games that you should win, sometimes you're going to draw games that you should lose. And mathematically, once you draw 2 games, that's much worse than splitting a game and winning one and losing one. And that's why once you start drawing too much, you actually starts affecting you in a negative manner, because some of those could be wins and some of those can be losses, and now you're losing 1 point, 2 points here and there. And at the end of the year, that makes a big difference. So I've never been a big fan of teams that draw too much. I'd rather have them be more wins and losses, because then that kind of shows either you're really going for it, and even when you're not there, you're still kind of going for it. And a lot of times that's where those losses come. I mean, it's still early in this. We still haven't hit double digits yet in games played, so it'll be interesting to see if this kind of levels out, if the teams that we expect to do better, like Red Bulls or New York FC, kind of climb up, and which teams maybe kind of come back down to earth. But besides that, I think the real DC United, I think, is kind of the real deal. They ended the season really strong last year, and they've kind of continued on from what they did ending last year into the season. So I think that's going to be the one team that's kind of not going to slow down on the East.
I agree. I mean, they're 4-2-2 right now, but ever since they got Rooney, they've just looked so much better. And this was a team that was down in the New England levels of suckage, if you want to put it like that, last year before they got him, and he's just been able to bring out so much from everybody else. I think Kellen Acosta also looks a little bit better with the way that he played compared to that stretch without Rooney, which added a little bit of that spice to it too. But ultimately, this is a squad that looks like they're going to be stable and will be leading that Eastern Conference the whole time. Let's switch over to the Western Conference, though. LAFC is your top dog, 7-1-1 so far with 22 points. For the top team overall in the MLS so far this season. LA Galaxy, Seattle Sounders there in the next 2 spots. FC Dallas, Houston, Minnesota, and Real Salt Lake are your current playoff teams. Big quote-unquote there because it's so early in the season. Sporting Kansas City, San Jose, Vancouver, Portland, Colorado round out the West. Let's do the same hypothetical storyline discussion here. What has really kind of caught you by surprise so far in the Western Conference this year? Has it been more about teams like Minnesota United and Real Salt Lake still kind of like climbing up and being solid, or has it been kind of the drop-off of teams like Sporting Kansas City and Portland?
Sporting has surprised me just because, I mean, they've also have kind of been like that Red Bulls of the West, where they're really consistent. They might not be top in the 1 or 2 spots every year, but they're more in that. But they'll be top 4 or 5 at the minimum. So that's a little surprising. I mean, after watching Portland the first couple of games, because I do watch a lot of Portland games, it hasn't surprised me because their defense, their back line has been absolutely atrocious. And I mean, that's why they've allowed 18 goals this season, only behind Colorado, who's allowed 23 for most. And the problem is, if you're not a good defensive team, it's so hard to kind of change that. And it doesn't help that they're constantly they're on the road their first 12 games, and they have to come home, practice, travel, leave, travel, come back, and it kind of doesn't allow you to get in a rhythm and get settled in very, very easily. So optimistically, I'm gonna say Portland still might have a chance to build back up, but that back line is definitely worrisome, and I think that's harder to change than offensive spark is. But on the other hand, you have LAFC, who have just been above and beyond everybody else in the MLS. Carlos Vela is playing like a man among boys, and the scary thing is he doesn't even look like he's going at full pace. He kind of looks like he's toying with everybody in the league. Bob Bradley shows why he's an amazing coach and shows his improvement and how he's been able to just kind of evolve as a coach. And LAFC has been a perfect spot for him. The big surprise, I thought they were going to be a disappointment this year, was the Galaxy, and they are right there, right behind LAFC with 6 wins and 1 loss. And I mean, Zlatan, talking about the effect that Rooney has had for United, Zlatan's had a similar and equal effect with the Galaxy, and that energy and that positivity he brings to the team, and you can tell they feed off of that too. So, I mean, LA Galaxy has been a surprise for me. Not Zlatan himself, but the way everybody has kind of played around him and the level in which they're playing at.
Well, when you look at the Galaxy so far this year, they've really only started to pick it up since March. I mean, when you look at their February schedule, which was even earlier on, they were not very good. They had a lot of surprising ties, even some struggles against some other teams. But then you look at teams like Chicago, which has been surprising. They beat Minnesota United, they beat Portland, they beat Vancouver, but then all of a sudden they destroyed Philadelphia, and then they recently beat a good Houston team. This is a team that is seemingly improving, heading into the day of release of the show game, at Minnesota United. We'll see how they handle that one. But this has been a team that I think has been very solid, especially with Zlatan Ibrahimovic coming in and adding so much. It does add a lot of a different perspective here in the West.
You know what's also crazy? Top 4 teams, or the top 5 teams in the top 4 teams in the West all have higher points right now than DC United first in the East. So that's something interesting when you look at the quality and if there will be a huge gap between the top half and the bottom half in the West too. That's something to keep an eye on.
Kind of flipping of what happened last season in the East, where you had New York Red Bulls and Atlanta United so far ahead of those third-place teams. So let's talk expansion, though, because we've got maybe about 3 minutes to talk about this. MLS expansion is updated to 30 teams. Some people are saying it's going to go all the way to 40 teams. St. Louis versus Sacramento is a big story. There's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. But it's coming at such a high level that even some analysts are starting to talk about how the MLS is a Ponzi scheme at this point because of its rapid expansion with no relegation ideals in sight, which I think is very interesting to me, because if you have 40 teams at the MLS level, where you could have an MLS 1 and MLS 2, where you have 2 20-team leagues with relegation or promotion between just those two, you could maybe see it. But it's been interesting, because I don't see expansion talks like this in any other sport, in any other league in the world, to the level that the MLS is going right now. It's absolutely wild.
I mean, I think I like to see the MLS more as an American sports league, where the structure is more NBA, more NHL than it is EPL, Liga MX. When you talk about the amount of teams in the first, talking about the amount of teams as they're going 30, that's about where most professional sports teams in the USA are. And so that's how I view the MLS. And so this expansion doesn't surprise me if I'm thinking about it in that sort of manner. So that's kind of where my head's at when I think about expansion. When you talk about 40, that kind of allows for an MLS for there to be relegation promotion possibly. But it's also hard to tell owners, hey, put in $200 million and possibly you have to work your way up to a first division or second division, or you could lose that too. So I think the MLS is kind of moving at a speed, and they're not quite sure where the end goal is, and that's a problem. But right now, if you see it more as an NBA type structure of a league, this makes more sense than it does if you look at it in an EPL structured league. That's the way I kind of see it. What do you think?
I think that's pretty similar, because when you look at this right now, especially with what they've done with the USL and having a very clear-cut USL 1 and 2. Having an MLS that's 1 and 2 may actually give more safety to those programs, because you could put Cincinnati, St. Louis, and Sacramento and Nashville all in like number 2 and have relegation and promotion that makes the European groups happy, but not necessarily the ones that are happy at the other, at the local level. And so it's an interesting balance between the two, but I'm not really sure how effective it's going to be to the American fan base. But ultimately, when we're talking about this setup, when we're talking about the feasibility of fans and of teams, it's frustrating, because even when you're looking at this setup, it isn't like an American sport. Even if you're comparing it to the NBA or Major League Baseball, it's nothing like smaller leagues like indoor lacrosse or indoor football or indoor soccer either. There's a definite mass expansion that I'm not sure what the end game is. And you made mention of that, where there doesn't seem to be an end game, but more importantly, that's why some of these comments about it being a Ponzi scheme is so predominant, is that if there's no end goal in sight, if there's no belief system in what you're investing in, you just want to get in on the latest trend, then you're not getting good ownership. You're getting people that have expendable wealth that are able to throw stuff in, and you're completely changing whatever culture that you could possibly grow. And for guys like Arthur Blank and what he's done in Atlanta, that's one thing. For guys like Beckham that's trying to put a team in Miami, that's one thing. But if you don't have that scenario and you're putting a team in St. Louis after St. Louis is basically just looking for something to fill after the Rams left, then it's not a good scenario for that city or that community or the soccer culture as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, I think, more than there are answers. And the expansion thing is just, they announced it. They're like, oh, well, these two, Atlanta or St. Louis and Sacramento, are going to battle for 28th. But don't worry, we're going to go up to 30 in a couple years. The loser just has to pay another $50 million, but we'll get you in. And my comparison to an NBA league, it's just more the number of teams, more than when you look about it that way, and also with the playoffs and things of that nature. But the number of teams, more specifically, is what makes me think of it more of an NBA than an EPL. Also, these teams are more franchises than they are clubs. When you talk about the natural origin of what a club soccer team is and what a franchise in sports in the United States is too. So that's another thing why I think about it that way. But yeah, I mean, how big is too big? Because these guys are soccer players. They cannot have a 50-game season, more league games. They need to kind of keep it in that in between the 30s, mid 30s, at the high 30s, because anything more and it just kind of gets a little ridiculous too. So how do you balance out schedules? How do you continue with the East and West? There's just so many questions that I don't think the people in the MLS know. I just think they just know, like, hey, we'll figure it out as it goes. The more teams we get, we'll just kind of we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it.
That's such bad business.
Yeah, well, I know.
It's frustrating. And so I think people that, especially with my ties to indoor football, with paying attention to the AAF and the changes that's happened with that, there's just people are starting to become painfully aware of what is starting to actually matter in the business side of franchises and sports. And when you bring up some of the stuff about like what Sky Blue's gone through, when you bring up all the things that are happening on the women's side, people are starting to be painfully aware. And I'm starting to wonder what kind of like cultural revolution is going to come against the MLS. Because if that happens, I could see there being some significant problems in the MLS here in the next 10 years. Because people are going to be frustrated and they're not going to be fans, even though that they may love and want the best for their franchise. They're going to be so burnt out by the MLS that they're not going to care.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, you make a good point, especially in the United States where you have so many other options, regardless of what you want, of what you like. So if you like soccer and you're tired of your MLS franchise. Well, you can watch the EPL, you can watch La Liga, you can watch Liga MX. There's so many other places
you
to
can
get
go
soccer.
to your local college. You can go to your high school. You can go watch youth programs in person just as well. You know, there's other sports. There's futsal in areas in the United States. You know, like that happened significantly with NASCAR. You know, and when NASCAR went and started doing all their rule changes, and Jimmy Johnson was still dominating the sport because his crew chief kept cheating the entire time, then people left NASCAR in droves. Unless you had like some cultural connection to it, you don't watch NASCAR anymore. But you know what has grown? IndyCar racing, rally car racing. People are paying attention to Le Mans in unprecedented levels in the United States. And so, like, they'll go find another league, they'll find something close to it, or they'll just something else. They'll watch their local product instead. And it just, there's too many options.
I mean, trust me, there is a place 2 blocks down the street from my place, an English place that opens up at 4:30, and they'll show United against Spurs, and people will show up to watch United against Spurs, and they'll get their fix that way. And that's not even counting other sports in these big city markets where the MLS team can easily be the 3rd, 4th, 5th option. So, yeah, you can't take a bite out of the apple, a too big bite of the apple if you don't know how to chew. So, yeah, I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, we've talked a little bit about this, and I guess we're not really big on the big size of the MLS. I think the only saving grace would be is if they created a very defined MLS 1 and 2. That would be the only saving grace that I could see. But we have talked a lot about it. We've actually gone over on our length for the show this week. So let's get your just kind of final thought on the situation, and then go straight into your shout out.
Final thought situation. Don't expand too much. Stop expanding without an actual idea and goal of what you want this league to look like. My shout out, Russell Westbrook. Keep shooting those shots, baby. Take your team out of the playoffs. Keep shooting them.
Yep, that'd be good. I mean, OKC's got Paul George after he left too. So you know, us Pacer fans, you know, we don't have a lot to root for anymore. So go Portland.
Thank you.
All right, that will do it for us this week. He's Ivan Sanchez. I'm Brice Burge. This has been your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media.